On Monday, Venezuela's left-leaning president, Nicolas Maduro, announced he had won another six-year term as his country's president following a disputed election marred by widespread irregularities. Well, since then, government security forces have detained poll watchers, and President Maduro, who rose to power as the appointed heir of socialist dictator Hugo Chavez, encouraged Venezuelans to report protesters, to let him know who was protesting the election outcome. Well, that's led to more than 1,000 arrests and at least 16 deaths. Now, due to pressure, President Maduro agreed to an audit of the election results, but what transparency concerns still remain? Joining me now to discuss this, Congressman Warren Davidson. He serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. He represents the 8th Congressional District of Ohio. Congressman Davidson, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Always an honor to join you, Tony. Thanks for talking with me tonight.
So let me ask you this. There apparently will be an audit of the Venezuelan election results, but based on what we know of how Venezuela operates, what we've seen thus far since the Sunday election, are we sure that this is going to be a transparent audit?
Well, of course not. I mean, we're not confident. We had transparent audits in some of our own states. And the idea that the Maduro administration is going to submit data to the United States or the international community that is somehow going to be trustworthy, I think, you'd be crazy not to have some suspicions about it. So there are a lot of irregularities in the Venezuelan election. And the question is, what are the Venezuelan people doing about it? And they're protesting pretty strongly. Unfortunately, there's a pretty brutal crackdown underway by the Maduro regime.
Do you see any parallels to what we've seen here in the United States?
Well, I mean, certainly not the kind of level of violence that is going on in Venezuela. You know, some people would say that January 6th was some kind of insurrection. It was a peaceful protest. There were people that crossed the line and did inappropriate things. But that's not what's going on in Venezuela. You've got an administration that is literally engaged in a very brutal crackdown, rounding up, opposition influencers and trying to silence opposition before it gets a chance to build. But the protests are strong all over the country. People feel like this election was not an honest election inside Venezuela. And I think that's the thing, is if you're going to go through democratic processes, you have to do the work to make sure that people trust the results. And unfortunately, in our own country, we still have tens of millions of people who don't trust the outcome of whether you're talking 2016 or 2020. Democrats don't want to trust 2016's election. Republicans broadly don't want to trust the 2020 election. And the hope is that we've done the right things and we will have the observers in place in our own country to make sure we have a trustworthy outcome. And maybe Venezuela, if nothing else, will be a caution for our own country to make sure that we have truly auditable results so that if there are questions, they can be scrutinized and proven valid.
What can the Biden administration do? What pressure can they apply to Venezuela? I mean, Venezuela has been, going south very rapidly over the last several years. We have very little contact with them. What can be done?
Well, the Biden administration opened it up. I mean, there was a big limitation on using Venezuelan oil in the United States. And because oil is a commodity around the world, lots of others were coming in and scooping up Venezuelan oil. And this pumped up the Venezuelan economy. And so the Biden administration opened everything up to Venezuela, which made their oil even more accessible. It effectively nullified the sanctions on oil from Venezuela. And frankly, they've provided a relief valve for out-migration from Venezuela. So in a way, they've become allies with Maduro and helping him have cash and also empty out his country of the opposition. So we could reverse those things and limit Venezuela's oil-based economy and make sure that they don't have a way to, purge their country of the opposition.
That sounds very similar to the approach that they've taken with Iran. And the money given to Iran fueling their economic growth and their ability to fund their proxies that are attacking Israel. It's also what we've seen with Russia. In allowing their economy to go forward based on energy. What's driving that?
Well, the Biden administration wants no energy in America, and they know that the country still needs energy. They're working towards banning, internal combustion engines. They want everyone to drive an electric vehicle or share public transportation or something. They say to save the planet, but the reality is it's to have coercion and control over the population. The reality is it's empowering bad governments all over the world and weakening our own economy. So they need to reverse this Green New Deal and produce more energy in the United States. And the limitation, in particular with Iran, Trump made it very clear, much like we had the Cold War with the Soviet Union, you can either do business with the United States or you can do business with Iran, but you will not have it both ways. And the Biden administration came in and reversed that right away. They flooded Iran with cash, and what does Iran do with it? They target Israel in particular, but they fund proxy groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and they destabilize the whole Middle East.
I mean, Congressman Davidson, this would appear quite obvious, but I'm not sure that the vast majority of Americans are connecting the energy policies of this administration with the foreign policies and how that is creating greater global instability.
Yeah, I mean that's the reality. Is oil is something that our economy needs. People use it. They didn't like the fact that gas prices were going high and they were taking pressure for it. So they drained our strategic reserve, and then they wanted prices to stay low. So they basically turned on spending with other countries, in particular with Iran, with Russia, with Venezuela. And these regimes aren't friends. They're not allies. They're not helping us. In fact, in a lot of ways, they're undermining us and drawing us into conflict around the world. So what do they do with the cash? I mean, in Iran's case in particular, they're very hostile to the United States. In Venezuela's case, they're destabilizing in South and Central America because of the way that they're flooding, the border with outmigration from Venezuela.
Congressman Davidson, I want to switch topics for just a moment. Earlier today, a prisoner swap involving 7 countries freed the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershowitz and 2 other Americans held in Russia. What can you tell us about these negotiations and that resulted in today's exchange?
Well, they were complex, multi-party. They involved Russia and Belarus, Germany, Turkey, help facilitate things. And we still haven't had all of our questions answered in the Foreign Affairs Committee. But at least Joe Biden did a press conference. I was glad to see him on his feet and in public. And I think the American people kind of needed to see that from the actual president of the United States. And then, it's a good sign. These 2 men, Paul Whelan and Evan Gershowitz, were, detained in Russia for a long time. I'm glad the Biden administration finally facilitated the release. I hope we did things in a set of good conditions. But you continue to see the Biden administration willing to pay any price, and it doesn't put punishment on people for causing harm to American citizens. So the fear is that you're really raising the bounty on American hostages. But in Russia's case, hopefully we see this as a path to some sort of peaceful dialogue that maybe can create a little more stability than we're seeing in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I mean, the instability that we're seeing globally right now needs a little bit of tamping down, a little bit of calm brought in. But I want to move to another Biden administration deal. They reached a plea deal with the alleged 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 2 other defendants accused of plotting the 2001 terror attacks that allows him to avoid the death penalty. What do we know about this deal?
Well, the de facto sentence has been life in prison because there hasn't been a trial, and there's plenty of evidence. They haven't, for whatever reason, wanted to bring this into court. And the reality is this isn't really a crime. It was an act of war. And so how do we provide a just outcome? Even in World War II, there were the Nuremberg trials. So a lot of people and families in particular wanted this trial, and they wanted a sense of justice. And by reaching a plea agreement, I think a lot of families feel like they were denied their day in court and a just sentence. And clearly, a lot of people feel the death penalty is the only just sentence for what was done.
Very complex issues that we deal with today. Congressman Warren Davidson, thanks so much for joining us today. Always great to see you, Warren.
Yeah, thank you, Tony.